Hi friends, welcome to Happy Out Home. Today we are talking about painting furniture, taking a thrift store find and turning it into a beautiful blue and gold cabinet. If you are new to my channel, welcome, and if you are returning, I am so happy you came back. Happy Out Home is a place where I provide inspiration to turn any house into a fashionably elegant home. In my prior video, Decorate With Me, I all showed you this painted cabinet that I had been working on, and so many of you said that you would be interested in learning how to do it, so I am providing a tutorial for you right here, going step by step to show you exactly the process. As intimidating as it does look, taking an old piece of furniture and turning it into something new is not difficult at all. But it does require patience, so the biggest piece of advice I have is to please be patient with it, take your time, and you will end up with a beautiful piece that you will love for years to come. I found this adorable cabinet at a local thrift store, and I was so tickled pink with it that I just had to bring it home. I've been wanting to refinish a piece of furniture for a while now with a couple colors that I've had in mind, and when I saw this, I thought it would be absolutely perfect for what I wanted. So the very first thing you want to do when you are thinking about painting a piece of furniture is to clean it really well. You can get a degreaser, but if you don't have one, I just did a mixture of vinegar and water, and I rubbed the entire piece down with a sponge, top, bottom, everything, and I let it dry completely. So after letting the cabinet dry overnight, it was time to remove the glass because I want to paint the panes that were behind the glass. So I removed the panes, and the glass was held on by these little strips of wood, and I removed the little strips of wood and took the pane and the glass out. And this little hole I am going to try to fix myself as well. It shouldn't be too hard. Step number 2 in the process is to lightly sand the furniture. So sanding furniture is never fun. It creates dust, it's a big mess. I know people try to avoid it, so the big question is it really necessary? The answer is yes, it is necessary. It is not necessary if you are using milk paint, but if you are using any other type of paint, it is necessary just to slightly rough up the surface so that the paint will stick better to the piece. The majority of finished furniture does have a stain on it to protect it, and you just need to remove the stain so that the primer will stick to the furniture. And it doesn't have to be a long, complicated process. And again, I'm using very fine grit sandpaper, and I'm doing it just enough so that the primer will stick to it. But again, I'm not doing any type of heavy-duty sanding. It is just really a very light sanding. Now you can see what the furniture looks like after having a light sanding. Some areas were a little bit more difficult to sand than others, based on the material, like the back of it, which is a very, very thin wood. Well, actually, it's not even really wood, that has a glossy coat on it, is more difficult to sand than the actual wood pieces, such as the shelves. Next is to remove all of the dust by wiping down the furniture again, and I used a wet cloth. Again, it's a good idea to allow the furniture to dry overnight. Anytime I put water on it, I wanted to make sure that it was completely dry. So here I am putting a coat of primer on, and the primer coat is just very slightly tinted blue. It's not completely white, so when I was at the paint store, I did ask them to paint it just tint it just very, very slightly. And I am only just putting on one coat of primer. and I am putting the primer coat all over the furniture. And this is what the piece looks like with just a very rough coat of primer. Again, I only use one coat before I start painting. Next step is to apply the very first coat of paint. And I used two different color blues when I painted this piece. A darker blue on the outside and a lighter blue on the inside. So here I am applying just the very first coat all the way to the outside of the piece. And this is what the piece looks like with one coat of primer, and one coat of paint on it. And the type of paint I am using is by Benjamin Moore, and it's called Advance. It is the same type of paint that I used for all my cabinets in the kitchen, and it's really a fantastic, superior paint for wood finishes and cabinets. So in terms of quantity, I ended up purchasing 3 quarts of paint, a primer, a light blue, and a dark blue, and that was enough to completely finish the piece. And this is what the furniture looks like after 2 coats of paint, primer plus 2. And that is pretty much what I ended up with. And I stopped at 2. I didn't think that it needed a 3rd coat. Had I not primed it, it probably would have needed more coats, but primer plus 2 was sufficient to make it look really good, in my opinion. And now it's time to work on that little hole in the cabinet. So I just created a back with a piece of cardboard and some tape, which is what the putty is going to stick to. So I'm not going to leave that on there. I just created the backing for it so that I could put some wood filler in the hole and it would have something to stick to. So with this particular type of wood filler, it turns yellow when it's dry. So it's pink when it's wet and it's yellow when it is dry. Now that it has turned completely yellow, I am just going to do a little bit of sanding to smooth it out. Again, I used the same type of sandpaper, the very fine grit sandpaper, and I just want to smooth out the surface a little bit so that when I do paint it, you're not going to be able to see all of the bumps. So now I am applying the first coat of blue paint, and again, this is a lighter blue than the outside. It is a different color. I am applying that to all of the inside, the top of the cabinet, like under the shelves, the side, the entire interior of the cabinet. And this is what the cabinet looks like with 2 coats of paint on the inside. So primer plus 2 on the inside and primer plus 2 on the outside. And the next step is to start adding the gold accents. So there are a couple ways to add the gold accents. You can do it with just a t-shirt, plain white t-shirt, and put it on with your finger. But I found that when I put it on with my finger, it just wasn't dark enough. It sort of like rubbed it off. So if you do want to do a very light gold, then I suggest you use the cloth. But if you have more intricate work and you want it to be a little bit darker, then I found that using a brush was much easier to do, especially where you have all of these little nooks and crannies that you need to get into. Just using a very small angled brush did the job wonderfully. But if you just want a very light hint of gold, rub it on, very lightly with your finger and an old cotton t-shirt, and that worked really well. Again, do you want it to be a little bit darker, or do you want it just to be very, very lightly accented? So you just kind of have to play around with it a little bit to see how dark you want the gold. And I was able to do the whole cabinet with just one container of this gold, accent. I will link it, the exact one that I used and the exact color, but what you want to do is you want to apply it to all of the raised areas of your piece. You know, all the pieces of molding that pop up, and they just look absolutely beautiful, accented in gold. And in addition, I used gold on the hardware, on the hinges and the hardware. And this is what it looks like when I have added all of the gold accents. What do you all think? This next part was a little trickier. This is when we have to add the glass back into the cabinet along with the insert. And I used, these are the little pieces of trim that hold the glass in place, and they had nails in them, and I didn't think that I was going to be able to nail them back into the cabinet without breaking the glass. I'm no expert, but I thought that that would be difficult and I didn't want to risk it, so I used epoxy instead. And I removed all of the nails, and this was a two-person job, because you really do need someone to kind of help you hold the glass in place. And then I just put epoxy on the outside and then put the inserts in place afterwards. And this is what it looks like. What do you all think? I have come up with so many ways to style it that in my next video, I'm going to show you multiple ways to style a cute little cabinet like this. I mean, I love this little thing so much, and the more and more I thought of it, the more uses I came up with it. So in my next video, I'm going to show you several different ways and uses to style a cabinet such as this.